Are they late to Bitcoin? Is it too late to buy Bitcoin, Fred, and benefit from it?
Oh, I mean, we're super early. We're very, very early. I mean, this is like we're at the beginning of probably a 20-year journey of massively high returns. It's going to be, we're going to have massively high returns for 20 or maybe even 30 years. That's basically, I think, where we are. So, you know, you're nowhere, you're at the beginning, like you're in the first inning.
Hey, Fred, how you doing? Long
Hey,
time
Nico.
no talk. I really enjoyed our conversation last time. I remember one of the things that you told me, which was very, very impactful, and you said, Nico, your life's going to change. And you know, the way that you've been kind of approaching it, because been approaching it, you know, as like for the last 8-9 years of my life now, I've just been, you know, putting specifically in the early years, like 80 to 90% of my what I was earning into Bitcoin. And, you know, been having this like very kind of live below your means type of mentality. And that's how I've been approaching it. And one of the things that you told me when you came on the show, you know, last time was like, Nico, your life's going to change in 2025. And I put a lot of thought into that lately and had that conversation with my wife as well. And she's been thinking about it because, again, I've been living this life. You know, of course, Simply Bitcoin has taken off. I have my own business. You know, things have changed, right? But I still have this like Bitcoiner-esque mentality of, you know, live below your means, you know, stay frugal, stay disciplined, stay this. But again, I am coming up on 9 years of doing this, right? So anyone who's been in Bitcoin 9 years, you know, it's a long time. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like there's a lot of people my age that got in, you know, roughly around the same time I did, which was class of 2016. Most people got in 2017, but it's essentially the same thing. What changes, Fred? Like, what is this change that you were talking about last time?
Well, I think the big one is real estate, right? That's going to be the biggest expense that you're going to make in your life is going to be buying a house. And that is not a cheap thing to do right now. You know, I have a friend who was just saying, you know, you really can't buy anything in any major U.S. city right now under $1 million. You know, you can't buy it in Miami. You can't buy it in New York. You can't buy it in LA. You can't buy it in San Francisco. You know, maybe in the middle of the country somewhere, you can still get something for $1 million. But you know, that's kind of your entry point right now. And I think the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to take the plunge and actually have a mortgage and real estate? And that's really the question. And you know, I think in many cases, the answer is, you know, for somebody like you who's been in Bitcoin for a while, I think maybe the answer is yes, you do want to get some real estate, you know. But I'd say if you're just starting out, and I would say I would suggest stacking would be a better idea right now than jumping into you know, mortgage on, you know, what is kind of an overpriced asset, really. You know, I think real estate's not going to do very well relative to Bitcoin. You know, I really don't think it will. And so, you know, I think you have to think about yourself as 10 years from now when Bitcoin's at $1 million. How smart is that house or that condo going to look? And I'd say probably not too smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
I mean,
and a guy that we both know, you know, Terrence Yang.
Yes, of course.
So Terrence Yang. Yeah, okay. So Terrence Yang posted something and he said, well, I invested in $250K into this condo. Nice looking condo, by the way, you know, apartment complex somewhere. And he's like, but I invested it, that would be worth about $2 million today, right? And I said, Terrence, it could be worth $10 million by the end of 2025, you know?
That's crazy.
And you know, you got a timeshare in a condo for $250,000, or you got a partial ownership in this apartment complex, or you could have $10 million worth of Bitcoin, on its way to going to be worth $100 million, right? So I really think, you really got to balance these things out. And, it's a tough one because I don't think you're going to see another thing like Bitcoin likely in your life. You might see it, but you're not going to get it on the ground floor like you did with Bitcoin. And you got lucky. We all got lucky. Our eyes were opened at the right time. But I just don't take that for granted. You're not going to go through life and you're going to see 3 of these. I don't think. So I think if you can rent. Rent. If you can, our friend, I don't know if you know Thomas Young, but like Thomas Young was like, well, whenever I look at a car right now, it's an $80,000 car. I look at it as a $250,000 car, and I'm like, you should, but you should also not think about spending $80,000 on a car. You should be thinking about spending, $600 a month on a lease. You got to resist the idea of actually buying stuff.
Yeah.
And lease as much as you want, I definitely think that's kind of from a personal planning perspective, I think, especially if you're young, it makes sense to, it makes sense to potentially not buy right now, Now, you do get the leverage on real estate. You're putting 20% down, but I got to tell you, it's like you want leverage. You can get leverage on Bitcoin too. You know what I mean? You can buy 2x the amount of Bitcoin that you have. I just think real estate's the loser here, and so I think you have to figure out how can you increase your lifestyle without increasing the amount of dollars you're forking out for cars and boats, if you're so inclined. And boats are the worst, right? They're by far the worst, right? Like there's no worse investment than a boat.
It's setting money on fire, straight up.
It's pretty much setting money on. I mean, I think arguably jet planes are worse than boats.
Yeah.
But those things just go to it's just like literally setting your money on fire. But
but I think with jets, it saves you time, right? So like you can make that argument with a boat, like it's straight up leisure, and you're not gonna if you travel a lot, the jet kind of justifies going through the pain of going commercial and all that stuff.
I used to have a jet 20 years ago. I was not my own, but I had net jets, right? And I flew around for 4 years. I had net jets, and I'll tell you, it's good, but it's not as great as you would think. And I'll tell you why. Because unless you got like the super duper big net jets, you're not going to Europe on one haul. From Miami, you could, right? But like LA to New York, LA to Paris, no, you don't. You're not doing that in one. So you have to stop and refuel, and that's marginally not even as good as flying first class.
Yeah.
No. And then unless you're Michael Saylor and you own your plane, and you tell the guy just keep it running. I'm gonna be 2 hours late. You do have to kind of make those appointments. You have those slots, and you get charged an arm and a leg if you miss them. So I don't know. I don't regret necessarily my private jet days, but yeah, all these things are not really what they're cracked up to be.
So one of the things that really stuck out to me, Fred, in this early part that we've been speaking, is in Lugano in Switzerland. I went to the Plan B forum, and I introduced this guy by the name of Marthi Malmi, right?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And this is someone who, a Bitcoin OG. He was one of the first people to talk to Satoshi, and I didn't know who I was presenting. I didn't know who I was introducing because I was emceeing one of the stages, and I introduced him like, this is whatever. And his name of his talk was, "This is my Bitcoin pizza story." And long story short, he said something along the lines of, I bought a flat. I bought my first flat, a 1-bedroom apartment in Finland, for 10,000 Bitcoin or something like that. It was like a ridiculous amount. And he just kept talking about paying for trips and paying for things. And he's like, if I have just kept all that Bitcoin, I'd be the third richest man in Finland right now. And it just kind of reminds me with what you're saying, but it also puts you in a predicament, right? So if it was up to me, I would kind of keep living this, you know, this live below your means lifestyle. But I am married. I have a wife, and I just had my first kid, and she's like almost 1 year old, and that changes the conversation, right? So
Yeah.
so we're thinking about probably leaving Miami because it is, and we're for a multitude of reasons, not only because real estate is so expensive, but I grew up on South Beach. I don't want to raise my daughter here for the obvious reasons. So we're probably gonna, go to a place a little bit more quiet and obviously a lot more affordable. But you know, at what point, does push come to shove? Because Fred, like at the end of the day, you need a place to live. Like you need a roof over your head. You need a place. Like, what's the point of working and hodling for so long if you're not going to enjoy it at one point? We only have one life at the end of the day, right? So, what would your advice on that be?
Again, my advice would be step up your lifestyle, rent something crazily good, rent something great, and just don't buy it. You know what I mean? Like, just think about the rent. Like, let's just say, I don't know what you're planning on spending for a place, but let's just take $1 million as a number, okay? Well, let's take $2 million, okay? But I'll take kind of LA price. I think LA and Miami are probably pretty similar. I'm not 100% sure. But like in LA, if you want to kind of get a basic kind of house, it's about $3 million. We're not talking like amazing, great, but this is like a basic standalone house in a kind of nice area is $3 million. Okay. So let's take that as our basis, right? But let's say also you wanted to rent whatever you want in LA, that same house or something. Maybe it'll cost you 20 grand a month. Okay. Well, I would say the difference between spending the $600,000 up front in the cost to buy that 20% down and get all the mortgage payments and everything else, I would say you're probably better off spending 20 grand a month on renting. You'd have to do your own calculation, but do that for just 2 years and then buy. You know what I mean? Because those next 2 years, you just do the math on your Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes to 500, let's just take 500,000. You're 5x from where you are now. Right? That house becomes very, very expensive looked on at, in sort of 2028 Bitcoin. So I would say resist the temptation, rent, that's fine. Burn some cash, live a little bit, live it up on the rental. And now the question is, is the landlord and so on, are they going to be okay with it? Well, you show them your hardware wallet, and or maybe move it to some place where you can, it's custody, like, I don't know, River or somebody like that, right? Part of it, or Fidelity Digital Assets or something, right? So that you're not just saying, hey, this is my ledger guy, it's mine, get an account with your name on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But and then I think we're getting to the point where you're going to be able to live on that. I think people will treat you like a first-class human being if you've got, if you got a bunch of Bitcoin. I really think we're getting to that point. And I just feel like the smart move is to rent a little bit longer. Just resist the temptation. Maybe it's only a year. Maybe it literally might be at 12 months, right?
Yeah.
It might be 12 months, so it's just like this could be the worst timing of your life if you buy that.
Right.
If you buy that house like, in February, that could be the worst. That could be your Marty Balmy moment. Right?
Yeah. I'm gonna take that advice to heart. Now, I think you've been talking.
But I am saying you should treat yourself. Like, look, you're not in grad school. You hodled. You did well. Great. Treat yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Look, example. I just bought a 911 convertible.
Nice.
Top of the line, whatever. But I didn't pay cash for it. I just leased it. Right. Doesn't matter. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, obviously I could pay cash for it, but I'm very, very cognizant now of cash. I don't want my cash. I don't want to spend cash on like a big apartment. Like, I have a similar type of thing just for fun. I would like to buy an apartment in Paris.
Nice.
But, that would be $5 million.
Yep.
And, I'm just sort of like, ooh, do I really want to spend $20 million on an apartment in Paris? And I'm thinking Bitcoin will 4X,
Yeah.
So like, I'm pretty happy just waiting and buying it for $1 million. You know what I mean? Effectively.
Yep. Exactly. It's just that's the only thing is it costs you time. Now, one of the threads that really stuck out to me. By the way, for anyone who doesn't follow Fred's X account, it's fabulous, and it's one of the fastest growing in the industry. He's really, really good at it, and I'm a big fan of his YouTube content as well.
Thanks.
And one of the latest ones that I really enjoyed, we're actually probably going to cover it on the show because it was really great, which is you kind of broke down like how much Bitcoin you need to retire. And that's a very popular subject on YouTube. And a lot of people are thinking about this, hodling ain't easy, especially if you do it for long periods of times. This is my third cycle, like it takes really the life out of you, like straight up. I don't know how else to say it. But what is the answer to that question? Like how much Bitcoin you need to retire? And I'm assuming it's different based on the age groups and the generations, right? So the floor is yours, Fred.
Yeah. So I would say, look, if you're very young, I'd say I consider under 30 very young, right? I would say 1 Bitcoin, if you can get to 1 Bitcoin, that's great. Now that's easier said than done. I mean, like I used to be a starving Stanford grad student, eating top ramen and drinking wine from bottles with screw tops, and so 100 grand sounds like a lot of money when you're poor, but I would say 1 Bitcoin. If you're in your under 30, you got 30 years to retire. 1 Bitcoin in 30 years will be enough for you to retire, I think. So I think just one Bitcoin is the answer. And, by definition, only 21 million people in this entire planet will ever get to 1 Bitcoin, and probably a lot less than that, right? So, it may be as little as 5 million people will ever get to 1 Bitcoin. Right now, you have about 1 million people who are at 1 Bitcoin, and I think the number, the sort of the max, I would say is 5. I would say, yeah. So I think if you're in your 40s or something, you don't have that kind of time frame. So I think the number there is more like 10 Bitcoin. Again, you still need to kind of hold on to it for a while, and if you're in your 50s or 60s, I mean, somewhere around 30, 40 Bitcoin, I think, is kind of what you really need. You know what I mean? It's not 10 anymore, right? 10's a little 10's a little cutting a little close, if you're 50 or 60, I think. And so even if you're talking about borrowing against whatever, I think those are the ranges, I would say.
Yeah. And
Do you agree with that, Nico, or what do you think?
I 100% agree because, with 30 years, let's say Michael Saylor's base case, not even his bull case, right? His 21-year prediction, well, now 20-year prediction is $13 million per coin by the year 2045. And
I mean, I just like to think of it in broad amounts. Bitcoin 1 million, Bitcoin 10 million, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. When are we going to get to Bitcoin 1 million? I would say probably 10 years from now, somewhere between 5 years from now. I mean, there's some people saying this year, right? It's possible, right? But somewhere, I would say, somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, right? I think that's kind of the likelihood for a million. Where are we going to get to 10 million? Probably around 20 years from now, you're going to get to 10 million. It might be 30 years from now, right? So that kind of time range. And that's kind of what the power law tells you, right? So the power law quantifies this stuff very well for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I agree with that assessment 100%. And
so, but if you're under 30, you got 30 years. So,
yeah,
you really need to think of it. The one thing you don't want to do is touch that Bitcoin. Like you really want to put that thing in a vault and have it time locked for 30 years almost. That would almost be the best scenario for you.
Yeah. And let me ask you something else, Fred. How much Bitcoin, regardless of age, today, if you wanted to retire and live a upper class lifestyle in one of the, global world cities, how much Bitcoin do you think you would need to retire today, essentially, to live that lifestyle? Because you and I both know, the cost of living in LA, Miami is like, you go to a bar, it's $40 a drink, right? That's the norm. I know very alien.
Going up going up. It's not going down.
Yeah, that's the norm. I grew up with that when I was, when I was going out, and my early 20s, late teens, it was $25 per drink. So nothing's really changed. It's just it's South Beach, right? LA, I'm sure it's something very similar. I would say New York is similar as well. I love New York City, my favorite city in the world. And like my original question, how much Bitcoin would you need to retire to live, in your opinion, to live in one of those big cities? And this isn't just the United States. Like, let's say Europe, the great cities in Europe. I love Madrid.
I posted something on this. Like, I'm trying to figure out exactly. I sort of said, what if I just decided to live in the absolute top of the line lifestyle? Okay. What would that involve? Okay. I would say, and I sort of asked ChatGPT. I said, help me out here. And it said, great. Okay. Well, that lifestyle would involve staying at 5-star hotels, like Four Seasons equivalent, 100 nights a year.
Yeah.
Okay. 100 nights a year. And then first class travel to, to trips all over the place, 100, equivalent of 1/3 of the time. So you're flying to Paris, to Tokyo, you're staying in the best hotels ever, right? You've got personal assistant, you got somebody picking you up at the airport, everything, right? That's the peak lifestyle, right? And ChatGPT came back and said, what was the number? I should get the post, but it was sort of like, about $1 million a year, ball or $500,000 to $1 million a year, or $1 million a year, right? Whatever. Let's just say $1 million a year, right? So my point is, if you just backtrack that, okay, well, you got to spend $1 million a year. Well, okay, it's actually next year, which is the biggest problem to your thing, right? Because if you say right now, let's say you start with 100 Bitcoin, right? Well, 100 Bitcoin is $10 million, right? Okay. And okay, well, you're going to peel off 1/10 of it in year one. But how much are you going to peel off in year 2? Well, potentially you're only going to peel off, a 20 or 30th of it in year 2, right? And you can borrow against it. So, 100 Bitcoin should be more than sufficient for you to live pretty much at the peak. This is like within a couple, right? And including like, education for your kids, private nanny, whatever you want, right? Now, you're not going to have sailor's yacht. You're not going to get the sailor house, right? You're not going to get the Palm Beach or the Aspen, mountain chalet on top of it. So you're not getting those things, but just from a pure lifestyle, 100 Bitcoin, pretty much over 100 Bitcoin, there is no hotel chain that's going to give you a better experience. The Four Seasons is it,
Yeah.
That's it. That's the peak, I stayed at the Four Seasons in Miami, beautiful place, I love, and I stay there just now. Great. Doesn't get any better than that, So I would say, look, if 100 Bitcoin gives you the absolute peak lifestyle forever, starting now, well, maybe you scale it down from there to like 30 Bitcoin or 25 Bitcoin. You should be able to live off that today, right? And so, now, of course, all this stuff is easier said than done because you have to have this crazy belief in Bitcoin and not panic sell it at the absolute worst point, which, I think that's kind of why we do these podcasts, I think, is basically to persuade ourselves, that this kind of worldview that we have is not complete insanity.
Yeah.
When I was talking to my accountant, she's like, "What, Fred? You are completely insane. Why?" It's like I get heart palpitations whenever I look at your portfolio, and I'm like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." Like,
we listen to Bitcoin content in order to reinforce our beliefs and entertain along the way. That was a very good assessment. I completely agree with that. Yo, I want to tell you about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. I'm talking about bitcoinwell.com. What makes bitcoinwell.com different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. And that perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Support Bitcoin on-ramps that are self-custody by default. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com today. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up, and bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to buy Bitcoin. Now, Fred, we're all expecting 2025 to be an amazing year, and I'll set the context a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Biden administration lost catastrophically. The Republicans have a trifecta in government. They hold the House, they hold the Senate, they won the presidency. This is the first pro-Bitcoin president going into office. And of course, the talk of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which if that gets passed, I think the poly market odds give it like a 40%. But if that somehow gets passed, we're going to 500K guaranteed next year. That's the way I'm looking at it. And of course, the nation state adoption with Nayib Bukele. And then, of course, Michael Saylor's amazing success with MicroStrategy on the kind of Wall Street institutional level. So just kind of aligning and giving context. So because we are going to go into kind of speculation type of talk.
Sure.
What are you expecting for 2025? And if you want, I can give my own kind of theories first.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you start? Yeah.
Okay. So I think 2021 was artificially cut short because of the China mining ban. You see there's a direct correlation between the hash rate plummeting 50% and the price going along with it. Why? Because all those miners needed to sell Bitcoin to relocate to more favorable jurisdictions. So I think 2021, we were actually destined to hit 100K. Now, what this caused was now most of the Bitcoin community has this form of PTSD. We have not experienced a blow off top in Bitcoin since 2017. It's been a long time. Right. So I think the general consensus, and the reason I'm bringing this up, is Bitcoin tends to do the exact opposite of what everybody thinks. Right. And it's just markets in general. So the general consensus is 150K Bitcoin, 180K Bitcoin. I think we're going either much lower than that or much higher than that, because I see most people throwing this number in that general vicinity. And then I think people are underestimating how bullish it is for Bitcoin for Trump to have won this election. Like, it was a big deal. Like, people underestimate this. And even if he doesn't pass legislation through, the things that he can do via executive order is a lot, right? So that's my general theory. I think it's going to blow. I think it's on the upside. I think it's going to blow past 200K minimum. That's my theory. I would love to hear yours.
Okay, so my theory is less on the number that we're going to hit this year. That I think we have a longer runway. So I don't know how much we're going to go up this year. I think it could be 200,000. That might be it, right? It might be 500,000. Like, if it was 200,000, I'd be very happy. If it was 500,000, I'd be very happy. It doesn't matter to me, right? I definitely don't think right now that 2026 will be a down year. So I don't think that the mining cycle or anything has anything to do with anything at this point. We are at the tail end of that mining argument, where what the miners did mattered. I don't think it matters anymore. So I think we just have to get rid of the cycles idea. And I understand we've had it. We've had it for the first 3 cycles, really bad. That there was, this was, but I don't think it matters right now. I just don't think it matters. I really don't. So, I think the real question is not how much do we get next year? I think the real question is, how long does it take us to get to 500,000 or 1 million, and it may take us a couple of years, and that's fine. It's, it's perfect. So my view is, I also kind of view that the Bitcoin strategic reserve, look, it may happen and there may be this, but look, America's kind of broke right now. So I don't see them, kind of spend, and we've got to refinance $7 trillion in treasury bonds this year. So I don't see us really contributing a lot of money to this strategic Bitcoin reserve. Trump's got he got his work cut out for him on many, many different fronts, right? To kind of curb immigration. He's got to clean up this excess government waste. He's got to do a lot of stuff. And I don't think Bitcoin does not need the Bitcoin strategic reserve. We will do fine without it. It's fine. Doesn't matter. Like, the only thing I really want or expect him to do is to label the existing Bitcoin that he has as a Bitcoin strategic reserve and stop. That's it. Like, I think fixing the United States is more important than buying a lot of Bitcoin right now. That's my view. Like, I feel like there's enough problems with the United States. We got into enough problems with the Biden administration, and even before, right? We got a broken house, a broken car. Let's fix the car, and let's give Bitcoin a room to run, because it's going to run all by itself. It does not need training wheels at this point, and I just feel like there's so much money that wants to get into that will want to get into Bitcoin, that we don't need to come up with Middle Eastern buyers or strategic reserve or anything else. I think it's just naturally we're going to have this mass of money want to find itself there. And so, and it will, in particular, if America is Bitcoin friendly. And all it just needs to do is, well, the most important thing I think is to solve this Operation Choke Point 2.0. We need to make banks be able to hold Bitcoin. We need to stop criminalizing people like you or me who bought Bitcoin a little earlier, than the average dog. And, we should be part of the financial system. That's it, And so, and we should make it legitimate for businesses to own Bitcoin. We shouldn't penalize them. So we got to end this kind of crusade by the FDIC and Elizabeth Warren and everybody else on Bitcoin, right? That's the most important thing. Like, let's end the crusade on Bitcoin against Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, right? Let's stop that. And yeah, if you want to, if we can buy some more Bitcoin, great. We don't need to do it right now. I don't think that's needed. There's so much money out there that it will just naturally come it'll raise the price naturally. And so, and I also, in a way, I don't want to blow off top either. I actually don't want one,
Okay.
because blow off tops usually are followed by nuclear winters, and I don't know, like, I don't want another 2022 or 2018. I'd rather have just a mild, correction like we had when the Germans sold their Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Down 30%, whatever. Okay. Like, we just don't need massive people going completely berserk on 100x options and everything else. We don't need that. That's not good. Right.
Yeah.
And companies going bankrupt and Sam Bankman-Fried's and all the rest. We really don't need that. Like, the best case forward would be, if we double this next year, when we doubled again in 2026, like, how great would that be?
That would be phenomenal. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And everybody be a little bit upset. Like, oh, we only went up to 200K. We did a Bitcoin reserve, but we didn't put much in it. And fine. Absolutely fine. I'm the happiest guy in the, so I just, I'm just not, I feel like we need to kind of stop the, like the hype of like the Dennis Porter kind of stuff, like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is signing this, and then, Ohio is going to do this. Like, guys, like, calm down. It doesn't matter. Like, we're not in this race to hype to blow off this. And like, we're good. We already won. Now with Trump in, we have won.
Yes.
So we have won. Like, we're going to win. So, I think it's kind of like, smell the roses, enjoy life, and let's not get bent out of shape because we don't do a 10x. If we do, and I'm with you, Nico, look, human greed is such that it's very possible that we get some completely insane blow off top. It is possible, right? Why? Because, it's not going to be, but it won't be the same kind of people. It won't be the kind of the degen retail from, 2020, 2021, right? Or 2017. It won't be the same guys who bought Tron and, and FTX and, Solana and stuff in 2020. What I think it's going to be is a bunch of extremely wealthy, rich people who all of a sudden sit there and go, wait a second, I only own 0.01% of my net worth in IBIT. Maybe I increase that to 2%. And that, if we get that shifting, that'll just completely, that's what could do it, right? Because there's so much of this money that's in real estate, that's in bonds, that's in overpriced stocks, and they don't have enough allocation. They have no allocation to Bitcoin. So to me, it's like a complete and utter inevitability that happens. But these people are very, very, as they're very, very. We're still at the point where they're bad mouthing Bitcoin. They're like, yeah, maybe not really an asset. There's no value, no intrinsic value. So it may take a little longer than 1 year for them to completely come to, but I don't think it's going to take longer than 5 years. I think, to me, the horse race started a year ago with the ETF.
Yes.
Because before the ETF, like, you're some wealthy guy in Miami, right? I mean, you're going to go buy a cold card, learn to use that thing, and then move some money, buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, and then move that. You're not going to do that, right? I mean, the amount of wealthy people who do that, it's very small, right? And they're not going to leave. They may have a Coinbase account or something, but they're not going to leave $5 million on Coinbase, 10 million. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what wealthy people do. They have wealth managers, they're conservative, they have places, brokerage accounts that they had money in for 30, 50 years, And I mean, I've had my Goldman Sachs account since 1998, you know what I mean? Or 95, so we're not people, people are cautious with their money. They're not like, oh, new paradigm, I'm going to put all my money in Coinbase. No, they're not going to do it. So I think it's going to change, but all they need to do is just allocate now a very small amount into IBIT or FBTC. And those guys are going to clean up. They're just going to clean up. All the ETFs. But I mean, I think those two in particular are just going to be, IBIT is going to become bigger than the S&P, SPY. It will.
That's a very strong statement, Fred, but I completely agree with you.
I mean, it's going to become the number one ETF of all ETFs, right? That's what it's just going to become there's a reason Larry Fink is now so bullish on this stuff. Is he probably has the best view of where money's going of any person in this planet. Okay. Including Michael Saylor. I'm just saying, like, he's right on the catbird seat. He can see everything. And he sees, like, wait a second, there's all this money that could go into ETFs. I want it to go into my ETF. Right. And, if he's making 20 basis points on, on $10 trillion, that's $200 billion a year. I mean, like, this is going to be, and I think where we're headed is that IBIT becomes kind of like it is in everybody's growth portfolio. Mm-hmm. Like everybody owns some S&P, whether it's IBIT or SPY or the Vanguard one. Everybody has. You don't find an investor who does not have some allocation to the Standard & Poor's. That's it. Everybody does, right? And I think 10 years from now, every single investor will have some IBIT. Every single one will have, and it's not going to be 0.1%. It's going to be 5%, that'll be the norm.
So Fred, let me ask you something. And by the way, I completely agree with you. And the reason I agree with you is because the Bitcoin is going to outperform the S&P. So it's inevitable that people, if you're an investor, you want exposure to that. Now, my question to you, Fred, is, do you agree with Saylor's stance that we're going to see in the early days, he believes a 40% compound growth in Bitcoin, at least for the next 10 years, and then it'll start to tail down to like 20%. And I mean, the thing about compound interest, and if anyone is not familiar with it, there's so many calculators online. Like, it's the reason that Warren Buffett is as wealthy as he is, right? And especially, like, if you do something for 10, 20 years, 30 years, and you have a compound interest of 20%, 30%, you can grow a great deal of wealth, especially the longer.
I'll give you an example of that because I've been doing a lot of kind of digging around in economic history. And, if you look back at the Medicis in in Florence in the 13th century. The highest interest rate that they ever got was 20%. That's the look. I mean, if you're getting double-digit interest rates, those things compound to massive amounts of money. So 40%. I mean, this is insane, right? It's and obviously last year we had 120%. Well, I can't even know 150%, right? Basically, right? We've outperformed it, but all you need to know is anything above 20%. It's amazing, right? This is unbelievable. These are wealth makers. So I think that you're right. It is the miracle. They said it's the seventh wonder of the world, or the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest, and it really is true. It's if you can hold on to something that's growing at 20, 30, 40% for 10 years, you become extremely wealthy inside of a decade. I think investors are not stupid. They're going to look at IBIT. They're going to look at what it did last year. If it does another good year, they're going to just keep on going. They're going to be like, okay, I like what I'm doing here. I'm just keep more of this. So, to me, the history of Bitcoin as an institutional investor product started last year. So that's it. That's when we were 1 year in. We had a great first year. Now we're going to have our second year. If our second year is great, ooh, man, the money's just going to come in it's still like, well, we got to still test. It's only a year old, but typically on Wall Street, let's say you start a new fund or this is a kind of good example. If you start a fund or you're a trader and somebody gives you money, right? Your first year, you have a blowout year, you do 100%. Okay, something like that. You're going to get a lot more money the second year. But if you do it for 2 years in a row, then people are just going to be like, okay, give this guy all our money. That's the human psychology, right? Like,
of course,
that's the way things work. And so I think, people are going to look at the audited results of IBIT. They're not going to look at what Bitcoin did before IBIT. They're going to look at what happened after the ETF came out, after they could finally buy it. They could first buy it. And that's it. So I think we're in for a very long ride, a really long ride. And that's the main thing I want to say is you've been in Bitcoin a long time, but you've only been in institutional Bitcoin the same long time as anybody else, 1 year, because everything you did before that, it's sort of it's like a VC when they invest in a company. They view that the time starts when they invest. Like whatever happened before that, whatever the founders did before, it doesn't matter. Clock starts when the institutional money comes in. And I feel like that's where we are with Bitcoin. The clock has started on this new thing. And the last thing you want to do is use your models from the previous era to kind of project the next era. But those models are not going to work anymore. Like you may think, oh, well, it's going to do this, the mining this, the cycles. Oh, great. You sold in, and you want to kind of time it so better than anybody else. You're going to sell in August of this year. Great. You're going to sell in August. You're going to be up 60%, 70%. And you're going to think you're going to miss the crash of 2026, except there won't be a crash of 2026. And there won't be a crash of 2027. And, it'll just keep on going up. So, all I know is I'm not smart enough to say that I think 2026 is going to be a down year. So I'm definitely hodling through from here on out. Now
that's a good point.
That's what I'm doing. Now, on the other hand, will I sell a little bit just to spend it? Not for not for portfolio reason, but just buy something, maybe, yeah, probably, you know, I might peel off some money, do something. I don't know what, but like you, but I think money's meant to be spent, but I think that, I do think that we're in kind of now for a long, very positive route, similar to buying Apple stock, in 2010 or something, or Amazon in 2010, and those, I can tell you, look, I owned Apple in 2008, and I bought it when they first came out with the iPhone. I was like, oh man, this thing's going to be great. The stock doubled. It did bad, and then it doubled. And it recouped after 2010. I said, oh, I'm done. Great trade, fantastic. Stock went up 50 times after that. 50 times, okay? Apple has gone up 50 times from 2010 till now.
That's crazy.
And, did they have a new product? Not really. They had the watch,
Yeah.
They had the watch, you know what I mean? The iPhone came out while I still had Apple shares. I bought in a little bit along the way, but I had a pretty big position in Apple. And, Amazon, you could have avoided the crash of 2000. But then it's afterwards that even in the last decade, Amazon just did phenomenal, right? So it was a very mature company, nothing fantastically new, or there was no strategic reserve that moved Amazon up, right? Just went up, just kept on going up, right? So I think Bitcoin's going to be like that. It's not going to be like we need this strategic reserve, or we need this Saudi sheik to buy it. This thing's just going to work. This thing will just work, and it will work. And really, you gotta just extend your time frame to about a decade. And I think you got to figure out, okay, how do I make sure that I have Bitcoin, my core position, throughout this decade? So whatever your plan is, you got to make sure that you do not sell more than 20% of your Bitcoin for the next 10 years. So you got that 20% you can play around with. You can do whatever you want. But keep 80%. As long as you keep 70 or 80%, the numbers are going to be amazing for you.
Yeah.
All of us old timers are going to be really, I think, are going to really, really benefit from just the pure growth factor. And I think that the key is just to kind of keep a level head and stay calm and understand there will be volatility, and fine. We're okay with it. And it's volatility. When you bought you came in 2016, right? So about like $500 Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
Right. So
first Bitcoin was $670.
Okay, it's 670. Yeah, I remember when it crossed 1,000. Man, that was a crazy time.
Yeah.
And I was like, again, right? Because of course, it was there in 2013, but but yeah, but if you bought Bitcoin at 500 and it goes from 100,000 to 50,000, it hurts a little bit. But it's not a panic attack, right? On the other hand, if you went huge all in right now at 100,000, and it sort of ticks down to 50,000, that's kind of that's where you do have panic attacks at that point. So I think it gets easier as you're older, as you're further into this, right? It definitely gets easier.
Well, it's because I've had this conversation with my wife's parents, tried to orange pill them for a very long time. And eventually they listened to me, but eventually, like, one of the questions that I get from my father-in-law, which is like, are you going to sell? And I'm like, look, like, unless Bitcoin is going to the below 10K region, like, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm going to be up. Right. So, like, that's kind of like the way I look at it. But again, you have to pay your dues. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the work and go through the cycles. Now,
You got to get, I think the main thing, look, Michael Saylor came in a lot later than most of us did. I mean,
yeah, he had a lot more capital though.
yeah. But what I'm saying is, you and I we predated Michael Saylor, right? Okay, and for me, it was 2019 when I really saw the light, right? But and it was 2016, right? So Saylor is 2020, you know. So I think the thing about Saylor is though it wasn't only the capital, it's just he developed really strong conviction, you know, very, very early.
Yes.
And I think that's the difference, right? The difference is, what's your level of conviction? How convinced are you that this thing called Bitcoin is actually going to be probably the foundation of the world's financial economy 20 years from now? You know, and I can I basically talk to some Bitcoiners and stuff, and that's sort of the first thing I internally try to figure out is, are they really as convinced as me that we are talking about something that will 100% be uniform? It'll have 100% penetration down the road. Like, because I think a lot of people still don't, even if they've made money, even if they were early, even if they got into the cycle, they still don't really think that, they really don't think people are going to be using Bitcoin, and they don't see the, you know, the end game of hyper Bitcoinization. But I think you know, there are a bunch of us who do, right? A bunch of us who really can see this thing, and we were like, this is gonna happen, you know.
Yeah.
I can't tell you exactly how it's gonna happen with what strategic reserve or this or that, or I don't know, like, you know. But I can just tell you that I think Saylor's genius is that he realized, okay, this is definitely gonna happen. I'm 100% convinced this is going to happen. Now, given that he has that conviction, you know, how do you orient your portfolio given that conviction? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he's done an amazing job at that, you know.
100%. I mean, he just doubles down. He really believes, and I think you hit the nail on the nail on the head there, Fred, where you pointed out his ability to learn Bitcoin in such a short period of time. You know, usually it takes at least 1 or 2 years minimum. Most people, it takes a little bit longer than that. But his ability to grasp it from such a short period of time, and then just double down and, you know, leverage his company, borrow money, buy Bitcoin, rinse and repeat, is definitely, you know, and this is why his stock outperformed basically every company, including Nvidia, which is absolutely insane, right? But I have a question for you, Fred, which is, and we are getting to the top of the hour, and I do want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Are we, if people are listening to this now and they're running into this podcast and they see you on Twitter, they see you talking, and they see Simply talking, and they're like, what is this Bitcoin thing? Are they late to Bitcoin? Is it too late to buy Bitcoin, Fred, and benefit from it?
Oh, I mean, we're super early. We're very, very early. I mean, this is like, we're at the beginning of probably a 20-year journey of massively high returns. It's going to be, we're going to have massively high returns for 20 or maybe even 30 years. That's basically, I think, where we are. So, you know, you're nowhere, you're at the beginning, like you're in the first inning. So I think you're not at all late. And, you know, there's something very fractally about Bitcoin that it kind of, like, you know, in a way, 2024 Bitcoin was never cheap. Remember when you bought your first Bitcoin, Nico? It was expensive.
I thought I lost the train. And look, I was very young at the time. I was very kind of desperate point in my life. So
But you know, the same feeling you have about, oh my God, am I late? It's 2016. This thing was discovered. Okay. 7 years ago.
No, the point I was trying to make, Fred, is that like, so when I got in, it was under $1,000, and for the first cycle, so the first 4 years, I did whatever humanly possible to put as much as my income into Bitcoin, and I was very desperate, and I wanted to get out of the situation that I was in. However, I thought I was late because I met people that bought Bitcoin under $100. I met people that bought Bitcoin at $100 or $200. If I knew where Bitcoin would be today, instead of putting 80% of what I had, I think I would have put 95 to 100. I think I would have borrowed money.
Simon Dixon bought Bitcoin at 10 cents.
I would have borrowed money.
Wayne bought, who I do the podcast with, he bought Bitcoin at, $1. You know what I mean? Like
crazy.
You just have to get it. You have to get, it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is that those feelings are all, the feeling that you had in 2016 is the same feeling that some new guy is going to have in 25, now, looking at $100,000 Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. You're very, very early. This is less than 1% of rich people even have any Bitcoin. So we're tremendously early. There's going to be a lot of great gains, but it's going to be Bitcoin only. Just and don't try to time it. I mean, that's the main thing. Everybody who's trying to time it is going to screw up, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of my gut feel is they're going to screw up.
100%. I've met so many people in this industry for so long, and the general idea that I get, the general thing, and I completely agree with this, is don't trade and stay away from altcoins. And if I followed those two pieces of advice, I would probably have more Bitcoin today than I did if I didn't do any of those things. If I just stuck to DCAing and staying humble, stacking sats, staying solid.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, we are getting to the top of the hour, Fred, and I do want to be respectful of your time.
No problem.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is the second one-on-one conversation that I've had with you. Absolutely a pleasure.
Thank you,
and huge fan of the big Bitcoin book. I totally bought myself a copy.
Great.
And big fan.
We had a lot of fun writing it.
It's super, super awesome. I'm really glad to see that it succeeded. Could you tell everybody where to follow you, what you're working on, if they just want to stay on top of what Fred Krueger is doing, where could they find you?
Just go to my Twitter, .Krueger. And I have a link also to a website, like fredkrueger.org, I think it is. And I just have other links there. I have links of everything from books I'm reading to articles, videos about Bitcoin that I think are cool. And what am I working on now? I'll tell you that we're talking now about potentially an art project, an art book on Bitcoin. We're thinking about it. So that's something that's going to be pretty interesting. Sort of, we'll see if how that thing evolves. But I'm very, very excited at that. And I'm primarily just a Bitcoiner, but I'm also looking at investing in potentially some Bitcoin related things. Not as a fund or anything, just myself, Fred Krueger. So, I'm ultimately just go to .Krueger. There's a link to my YouTube there. You can see I put some videos up on YouTube you can go back and look at some of them. And the other thing I was going to say, what I'm very, very kind of long-term, my intellectual hobbies right now is I'm really trying to research the history of money and figure out kind of what does it look like when we're hyper Bitcoiners? What does lending look like in a world where we're completely on a Bitcoin standard? What do banks look like? What does the world look like on a Bitcoin standard? So these are sort of general questions I'm very interested in. And I've been doing a ton of reading of, very everything from the 19th century America to medieval Italy. So yeah.
And you can even make an argument that, a big reason as to why the Roman Empire fell was because of inflation. And that's just such a crazy rabbit hole. The history of money is fascinating.
That's true. So yeah, I mean, look, I think it's, as Bitcoiners, one of the things we're developed, we have this, we're not, I would say macro guys, but we kind of go, okay, well, there's this new money that we're all committed to. And then we're like, how do we get into this mess? How did we evolve here? And I'm not trying to say it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's more of it's sort of trial and error, right? We tried with gold. Well, that's not portable enough. So we need notes, and okay, then we need to put our gold in some bank, but the bank needs a business model. Oh, they're going to lend it out. Oh, they're going to go bankrupt. So there's, I think we're sort of iterating on, humans have been iterating on kind of the use of money over the last couple hundred years in particular. And I think Bitcoin is kind of the ultimate net result of that, right? I think, we finally cracked the puzzle. And I think I think Bitcoin's going to be the money for the next 1,000 years or 100 years or something. I think it will become the world money. And I think it's really interesting to think, how do we get from there to here? And what does it look like 20 years from now? Do we even have banks anymore? I mean, what do we do? How do businesses get funding? How does that work? So there's all these really, what does an interest rate look like in a hyper Bitcoinized world, right? I love asking those kind of questions. And a lot of people don't know the answer to. I've asked this question on Twitter, and people are like, it'll be negative or it'll be positive. It'll be really high. It'll be not so high. So there's no consensus at all as to what that world looks like, right? Because we've been in this fiat world for so long. What does the world after fiat look like? I find it fascinating.
Yeah, 100%. And it's going to completely dramatically change the world. And I think it's going to make the world it's going to make the world a much better place. I truly, truly believe that in my heart. Anyways, Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.